Hello, hello. I can't actually see you guys in New York, so I'll just have to assume everyone is there. But welcome to Shapecraft in New York City. We have a lot of topics and a lot of interesting conversations that I'll kicked off today. Jack Butcher will be joining us remotely very soon, and I'm really excited to share all things about Shapecraft with everyone. Um, the first thing that I wanted to do was uh, do a quick intro of Shapecraft. Let me add the deck. Um, and then this is the first of, for the people who are joining us remotely, this is the second Shapecraft Kickoff. We already did one in the morning in Paris, and this is the one in New York. And then we'll have another one in SF with an SF audience. But to get started, what is Shapecraft and what's interesting about it? I'll do a real quick dive into it. So, Shapecraft 2024, we'll be doing these on an annual basis. It is, very quick intro. If I haven't met you already, I am Bonafide Han. I'm the founder of Shape and Deca, and then part of 6529 Capital. And I also collect some art. I'm sure some of the artists from whom I've collected are in the audience. And the whole thing behind Shape is we are trying to create a place where people build new worlds, but it is built on top of shared state. And what do we mean by shared state? Well, I'm sure you've played a lot of games, or you've played some games where you spend a lot of time building specific items, specific skills, and at the end of the game, you exit that world, and it turns out, I mean, as expected, the items are not, they don't actually have meaning outside of that world. They're walled gardens. Whereas in the world of crypto and Shape, we have the potential to build new worlds on shared state. And I'll give you an example. So here is a project that was recently created by Ketchel Guled and the artist behind Archetypes. And so we have here a what seemingly is a poker chip. So here's a poker chip. What does it do? Well, it turns out to be an atom. So this atom is called Bn, and of course, in our real world, this an atom called Bn does not exist, and so this atom exists solely in the universe that was created by Goulet, and has all these properties like radius, density, and all these other things that you would expect from an atom. And then once you have an atom, you can have a lot of atoms, and these elements are arranged according to a periodic table. And you'll notice for all the chemistry fans that the periodic table does not, this periodic table is not the one that we have in reality. So that's interesting. And once you have a lot of these elements, what's next? Well, you can create a molecule. So you can do on-chain computations that will form molecules. And in this case, it's made of three types of elements, AB, GH, and R. And it has properties. This molecule itself has properties. And once you have a molecule, going back a little bit more, and this is the kind of UX. It's a UI for doing a lab. You can have reactions, and then you can mine these elements, and you can, just as in reality, you can explore chemistry. This is on-chain chemistry and physics. That is actually not hard coded, but it's procedurally generated. So it's almost a form of simulation. And that's the Autumn project by Guled, and this is such a great example of a project that is that gives us more interesting ways to build worlds. And I'll give an example. So here's the example. All right, so let's say you want to create this like sword. It's like you want to create a collection of weapons. And so the weapon collection is, let's say, made of atoms, right? And what you can do is, okay, there's like a base trait. Let's say the attack point of the sword is like 3. But if you add an atom to your sword, you can say that the hardness property does a multiplier effect on your trait of your attack power. And so now then the race is on to find the hardest autumn. And you actually have to go to the lab and go explore which autumns have the highest hardness property. And because it's procedurally generated, there's a whole like chemistry background to the whole thing, and you can create a deep crafting world. And so I think it's going to create this like really interesting way for people to interact with NFTs, build on top of NFTs, and the Autumn project will be the foundation of a lot of things that people will be building. And here's the interesting part. So here's another interesting part. So Shape has a property that so when you have a contract on Shape, then 80% of the sequencer fees for transactions that are done against your contract, it actually goes back to you. So if you own a contract and lots of people do transactions against that contract, 80% of the sequencer fees go back to you. Why is that interesting? Well, it encourages and incentivizes people to build on top of other worlds. So in the Web2 world, what happens is you build, quote unquote, intellectual property, and then when somebody else wants to use that intellectual property, they have to, ask you, hey, I'd like to use this thing, give you a bunch of money, sign a contract, and then we proceed. Here on Shape, because of Gaspack, what you want to do is you want to encourage people to use your contract as widely as possible. So here's a great example. Let's say you want to create a piece of a very complex world of land that has like ways that you can build on top of it. It fits together in interesting ways, and it doesn't have, I think, some of the failings of, let's say, the last cycle's land, which I think was really focused on trying to create limited land. Here, I think we should try to create land that has function, land that has utility. But besides that point, suppose the land is actually built on top of autumns. So when you mint a piece of land, it actually mints, let's say, 100 of these autumns. And then if your land contains, let's say, a rare autumn, or an autumn that actually has some functionality, let's say it's like something similar to uranium, and it's a highly radioactive, and it can be used in different ways. Well, suddenly your land is more valuable. So for the purpose of Gaspack, what Autumns has done is that the more things build on top of it, the more Gaspack it gets. So it completely inverts that dynamic where you try to in the old world you try to hoard your ideas and things that people can use. In this world, you're actually incentivized to get everybody to use it. And so Gaspack is a really interesting dynamic that will change everything. And then the last kind of example that I wanted to show is that you are able to build new worlds that are designed to be played. So here's an example. So this is an avatar. It's a character, and it was created by an artist named DK. I'm sure everybody knows DK. And it's really cool. So you have a default avatar, looks like this. And then you can choose to put additional items on the avatar or the character. So I got pants on him, sweater, a hoodie, and a t-shirt, plus some shoes, glasses, and a hat. And then even a Halloween mask that DK created. And this character is intended to be like a 2D, 3D avatar that is supposed to be playable. So eventually will be sprites that you can play, and these things will be running around in various worlds. And the project is called Deeple, DK People, and this slide was also taken from. So the background art is by Jarvin Art, and amazing piece of art. And the Deeple evocatively, I think, is placed in that piece of art, and it seems like the Deeple is ready to run around in that world. So DeepWalls are another great example of a world and another world that people can build on top of. The things that I just described, it goes back toward to what I call the web of NFTs. So these NFTs, they we kind of forgot in the last cycle that they are more than things that you can just buy, things that you can just sell, and things that you can just mint. They are fully programmable networked objects, and on an L2 like Shape, it has the chance to create and do. It has a chance to be to be fully powered NFTs, things where NFTs will programmatically talk to each other. You will be able to tinker with state inside of an NFT. And what we have done so far is, we have been trying to create the web of NFTs on Shape. And the last thing that I'll mention is, I deem it my own personal goal in life to kind of ensure that the web of NFTs will be born on decentralized rails. As Shape progressively decentralizes, this is going to be, I think, one of the most important parts of one of the most important ways that Shape can contribute to ensuring that that the world of NFTs and the web of NFTs that is created, it actually remains a free world. So this is one last thing that I'll mention there, and then I'll leave some of my details up here. If I know I can't see you, so I don't know whom I'm speaking to, but I think I know many of you. But if you want to reach out to me, this is my contact info, and that is Shape and Shapecraft. Cool. Well, without further ado, I wanted to invite Jack to the stage, and I'll remove the deck. Jack, welcome to the stage.
How are you?
How are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I am doing great. I've been doing these things. So I did the Paris one in the morning, now New York, and then SF after. So it's been a pretty hectic day.
Long day, mate. All right. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And let's see. Let me bring up a couple things. It is, and hopefully the food in New York and the alcohol in New York was good. I was like scrambling to order everything. Hopefully it was good. So without further ado, introducing Jack Butcher. We'll have a conversation about NFTs and worlds. And I think a lot of us know Jack Butcher, but here's an introduction. He is the creator of Visualize Value. And he is someone, I think, who distills, I think, really complex ideas into miraculously simple ideas, like a simple graph, like a simple depiction of something. And I've always found the things that he create as retroactively obvious, and then it is brilliant. He is also the creator of wildly popular projects like Chex and Pepen, and I am excited to have a conversation with you. The first question that I wanted to ask you was, one thing I've always wondered is, like, what is your secret behind creating these like powerful ideas that I think get everyone curious or moved or things like that?
So, thanks for having me. To begin, I appreciate it. And the Visualize Value, really, I guess, to speak about the origin story of that is probably the best way to explain the process. So, I began this basically daily creative practice probably in 2019 or so. I was working an agency job, trying to get my own business off the ground. And in the process of that, I was doing a lot of reading, trying to figure out what it was I would do when I was working for myself. And all these ideas that I sort of uncovered in that process of making the leap from full-time employee to entrepreneur at the time were all like so non-obvious to me at the prior to me discovering them. And that process was just me trying to capture some of those big shifts, some of those big ideas that helped me make that jump. And that daily practice of distilling those into visuals gave me this constraint to keep coming back to. And that was a really, in retrospect, a really powerful thing, is like having this very specific set of rules that you don't break out of when you're making something, because it's, saves you spending hours staring at a blank canvas. And for me, that was this white on black, super specific visual constraint with just a single typeface and these vector forms. And yeah, it's hard to describe some of the process, but a lot of it is just trying to take the logic of something, or trying to remove yourself from an idea enough that you can sort of objectively review it. And I always used to use this lens of like, what's the least charitable way somebody would interpret this? Like, imagine the person that's going to start the most violent argument against this idea, and then try and stress test it against all of those imaginary scenarios of someone attacking it. And that went on for years and years before I discovered digital art, NFTs, and it's a whole nother story of how that jump happened. But the premise of Visualize Value originally was like, the idea had to resonate with me personally enough to kind of see it function in reality. And then I felt like I had enough of an understanding of it to turn it into a visual of sorts.
Oh, got it. So you go through like a sequence of like pressure tests of like,
yeah, like it wasn't formal in the beginning, but when people ask me like, how do you decide when it's ready to ship? That's normally the mental process, is like, is this true in all of the different environments that I've worked in or lived in, or and having bounced around like 10 different jobs and worked in agencies where you kind of see the ins and outs of, I think that honestly gave me a lot of unconscious experience at the time that translated into the ability to kind of sniff the bullshit on the stuff you're making later in your career. That's probably the best way of describing it too.
Oh, I love it. And you mentioned basically you had a non-NFT world that you went you went through years of it, and then you discovered NFTs, and as I see it, you found NFTs to be this like powerful way of creating these strong communities, so for you, like what role did NFTs have in converting that world into communities?
Well, the crazy thing about the discovery, I think, is it made me rethink everything I was doing, in that a lot of the value, quote unquote, that I was creating was in these images that I was posting to Twitter, Instagram at the time. And I had to continue to run my agency business and have these consulting clients and build products that are tangentially related to those images in order to live from that creative practice. And then obviously the infrastructure that I was introduced to, Ethereum specifically, and NFTs in late 2020, but I kind of took action on it a few months later in early 21, was like this transition from the image can actually be the thing that has the value, and people want to own that thing. And the Visualize Value network at that time, even though it just existed on Twitter and Instagram, already had people that were way further down the crypto rabbit hole than I was at the time. And in just minting my first couple pieces on Foundation, it kind of highlighted these network participants that wanted to get involved at a deeper or more significant level. Maybe the products weren't like the education products or the consulting or the things that were like byproducts of Visualize Value were tangentially interesting to them, but like people reached out to me. This is how I found out about NFTs in the very beginning, was people who were following my Instagram like, oh, I really want to collect your work. And I was like, oh, sorry, I don't print these out. It wouldn't make sense. It would use too much black ink. That was the response at the time. And no, he's like, no, look, go check this out. And I was given the link to OpenSea. That was late 2020. I went on it. I was like, what am I looking at here? I have no idea. And then it just kind of went out of my head for a while. And it wasn't until somebody sent me a foundation invite that I got it. You know, it was like hyper obvious what that ecosystem was, the auction house and the gallery and the way to present your work to a social graph and all these things. And that was a couple years of like really low, like one-of-ones, low volume, specifically commentating on, like taking that same approach that I had with the earlier transition I was describing from, you know, going from employee to entrepreneur, and now kind of doing this meta commentary on what Ethereum is, what it means to own a digital object. All of those early one-of-ones are descriptive of those technologies and paradigm shifts and things of that nature. And then a year, 18 months later was when I really started playing with these like higher volume collections. And obviously the network effects that those unlock are significant in comparison to, you know, a couple dozen people owning one-of-one work. And the whole process of developing those projects is super rich as well. If you have people that are kind of watching it evolve as their, you know, ownership is intertwined with that process of you working on it. So yeah, I guess the different epiphanies have occurred at different stages, and like the scale of the network unlocks all of these different opportunities and allows you to be more creative or use more of the canvas. If you think of the network as a canvas as opposed to just the image container on a one-of-one auction site, the underlying infrastructure can allow you to do super interesting things with the tokens and the images in combination.
Yeah, that's fascinating. If I actually look at a lot of the work that you've created, it almost seems like what you have done is almost like a pure distillation of like a person saying I am part of this tribe, as in like I love the way that you think, and I want to be part of that tribe. And it actually is kind of brilliant how it's almost like planned, you know, the years that you went through, visualize value, and then with NFTs completely activated this kind of rabid community around you. It really is fascinating what you have done.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I mean, and not premeditated in that sense either. It's like the opportunities that have unlocked themselves by mostly listening to the people that were involved in the network. Obviously, there's like a dialogue happening there, but the demand for the work being ownable was validated by the people that were already consuming it, as opposed to, and I think that is maybe an underappreciated point of discussion, or the way we think about what resonates on the internet, and Ethereum, these tokens specifically, being a way to like enhance the quality of connections in those networks. There's like a chicken and egg approach, right? You can make something compelling that works on top of that, or you have something compelling that can be augmented and improved, and like, again, create these richer types of engagement with that infrastructure as an additional layer to what you're already doing. So you kind of come at it from either side. And in my case, it was the network existed, and it's changed shape a ton over the last 2 or 3 years because of how hard I've leaned into the crypto side of things.
Yeah, it makes sense. And if we zoom out, where do you think we are on the adoption curve of NFTs?
Well, I mean, just in terms of the scale of the internet versus the number of people participating in this portion of it, I think I used this phrase the other day. It's like a cottage industry of a cottage industry of a cottage industry, like where we are at the moment. And like, that's an exciting thing too, is the level of like the quality of relationships that I've formed in this tiny ecosystem is so high, and so much higher than anything I've done on the internet before. And I've been a internet native creator, you know, throw inverted commas around basically every word in that sentence. But the degree to which this like consumes me personally is like, it kind of reminds me of when you get on the internet for the first time as a kid, and it's like once you've kind of crossed the Rubicon on that, it's like it's game over. You're just like in that world, and it's very hard to go back. And obviously that has to begin with some kind of meaningful experience, interesting experience. And for me, it's super compelling to be able to switch my working activities from like making these things as a hobby to making them full time. So I had that very compelling paradigm shift personally. But there's millions of people that are in the situation I was in 3 or 4 years ago that are outside of this world. And yeah, I think it's hard for me to wake up and think that this isn't the obvious trajectory, like the owned internet, the ownable internet, as even a broader conversation socially, in the same way that like your quality of life in the real world aligns with what you're able to own, your property rights, things like, you can go down a very deep rabbit hole there. But that is a paradigm shift that I think is, you know, the quick way to say it is like, I can just right click save this thing, right? Which we are familiar with for years as the critique. But when you start to think about, oh, actually I spend 16, this is my unhealthy commentary here coming out. So I'm spending 16 hours a day on the internet sometimes, right? And I'm a renter, and these interactions I'm having are, you know, not increasing we're not operating on that level where you like own a part of a network and you're interacting with people that own that network, and the interactions are so much richer because of that. And maybe the like most cynical interpretation of that is like the speculation that invites in the short term turns so many people off. And that was true. That was what happened. And also the scale or the kind of analogous behavior with the old world, where we kind of try and one-to-one fit on top of what we're doing, what we see in like the traditional art world or the traditional gaming world or whatever it might be. We kind of skeuomorphically try and move it into this world. That also doesn't really work, in the same way that like I still believe that the surface area of most digital artist collections is too small. You know, and there's like a careful balance to be enacted there, where there's, you know, perceptions around how scarce your work is. But again, the scale of this industry, we are kind of at an inflection point where it's like, this either is going to happen or it isn't. And the number of participants that would have to be involved to make this last is so many orders of magnitude more than what we currently experience, that, you know, some of the behaviors that we're trying to force, I think, are like kind of ignorant of the potential of the technology. You know, I think maybe the most interesting point on that is like in 2021, if you remember these like DAOs and legal structures and like governance systems to buy single pieces of art, right? Like I forget even the names of all of them. There's tons of them, hyper convoluted and complicated. And really that mechanism has existed at the base layer without needing any of that stuff to begin with, which is like the additioning feature of a artwork. You know, like ownership of this finite thing can exist across all of these nodes without hyper complex governance structure, things of that nature. But we are borrowing these like skeuomorphic models from the old art world in order to, I don't know, legitimize this stuff, or just not have to have as awkward conversations about how different it is. But it is fundamentally different in my view. So early is the short answer.
Really early, for sure.
Yeah.
In fact, we go to these events and so many of the faces are very familiar, right? We run into the same people. Yeah, and I totally agree. I think in many ways, all these like belief assets that we've created, I had no part in creating, I think, the first cycle of belief assets that were created in crypto, and the first, which is the mother of all, which is Bitcoin. Um, these things really go through these like cycles of exuberance and trough of disillusionment, and we went through one for NFTs, another one, and I think this cycle for NFTs, it's very important actually that we uh, that we add function to NFTs. So I think of it as like we need to build the NFT economy. These NFTs actually have to do things, um, and then naturally people will collect things because it's beautiful, and that is human nature. Once there's economic activity, it's human nature to come and collect lots of things, and we see that all the time. But yeah, I think it is our collective kind of, it has to be our collective goal to increase the pie, increase the size of the pie. So one question that I had for you was, okay, so if that's what we need to do, this cycle of NFTs, we need to get more people involved, we need to have these NFTs do other things, and then thereby increase the size of the economic pie of NFTs. What are some of the things that you would like to see people build in NFTs that could be interesting for society in general?
But I think a lot of what is left after these periods of exuberance or whatever you want to call them is like things that are legitimately interesting or new or a combination of both, and also like experimental in nature. So you have these kind of formats or mechanics that get cemented as the kind of the like apex asset of the category, like a CryptoPunks, let's say, that then spawns 10,000 things that look exactly the same as it, right? Like literally down to the trait distribution, down to the token supply, down to the chain it's on, all of those things. And there's like incremental progress that happens there where you might get somebody that's like appreciates that aesthetic slightly more and wants to engage in that. But what it really takes, and from what I gather, what Shapecraft is organized around, is like running experiments on this infrastructure that are fundamentally different in the way they're constructed, in the format, in the things you can do with these tokens that are also downstream of how fast or cheap or different ways that the infrastructure has improved since a CryptoPunks, for example. And like I don't think there's any direct answer. Obviously, if I had that answer, then maybe we wouldn't need to do any more conference calls ever again. But the idea being like novelty is really maybe frowned upon in some senses, because like novelty for the sake of novelty, but we also have to maybe appreciate that what we're doing is so novel in nature, like it's a massive privilege to be able to work in an area that is both like bleeding edge in a lot of ways and have people want to interact with something like super experimental and new. And I think, yeah, like experiments at bigger scales with different mechanics, different dynamics, like even watching that stuff play out is super interesting because it requires a level of engagement and interest that is so much more significant than just, I understand this thing on the face of it. And I think we're seeing like, the degree to which that innovation or interesting things are happening does bounce around these different parts of crypto. And I don't know if the majority of that is happening in NFTs right now. It's probably a fair statement. But to me, they are the most interesting set of primitives in crypto, beyond you know, a Bitcoin, which, as you mentioned, is like this fundamental, massively respected cornerstone, like don't mess with it. That's like its role is to preserve value at the very bottom of the stack. And these primitives are, you know, a few layers out from that, but can enable so many new and interesting things that we haven't even conceived of yet. So I feel like that would be the TLDR would be like run way more ambitious experiments with this stuff.
Well, I couldn't agree with this more. I think especially if you look at some historical examples, so many of these like new areas, the people who kind of like pushed it were they're the experimenters, the hackers, the rebels, and um, and it's not just, let's say, like a technical historical example, like in technology, but also like artistically as well. You often found this kind of like a person would try a different technique, and then everybody would observe that it's like, oh, here's a new technique, and suddenly over the ages people start copying it, and it becomes derivative, etc. And then somebody else comes into the stage, and it's like another experimental thing. And the experimenters, the hackers, the rebels, these are the people who kind of like forged the way. And I love the way that you phrase it as like we are the cottage industry of a cottage industry of a cottage industry.
Like,
And
no,
indeed,
for
like
sure, I think that's true.
yeah, I totally agree. And yet I think the experimenters and the hackers are actually among in this room today. And so and yourself included. And the whether they're joining us remotely, or whether they're in the room right now, or whether they'll hear you because they'll look at this recording and want to listen to what you say. What are some of the things that to these experimenters, to these hackers, like what would be some of the areas that like you would say, hey, go take a look at this thing. This is really interesting. Or it could be like, what is the next generation? Let's say like CryptoPunks. It turned out to be an open database, and one of the most strongest ways to create community. So it's like a community formation tool. And it could be like, oh, what is the next generation of community formation tools that we could create on NFTs? So the long story short, the question is, what would you kind of advise these experimenters, these devs, these artists who are going to be creating worlds? What advice would you give them?
Well, there's a couple things that are interesting, and maybe like on the backdrop of like meme coin mania, like the new entrant today is far more seduced and interested by the feedback loops in meme coins than NFTs. And that's not, not to say that every component of that should be or can be like emulated for success in different areas. That's not the case. It's like, if you think about how these things grow really large and like active communities, a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is no cap on participation. There's no hard limit on how many people can participate in this thing, and like the infinite fractionability of a coin which represents something versus these, the finite ownership of I think Punks is probably 2,000 or 3,000 holders, right? 10,000 pieces, but 2,000 or 3,000 holders. There's only so much noise that network of people is going to be able to make by themselves. And then it becomes about what you can do in the real world to get more attention, which is, make beautiful books, get your work introduced into these massive cultural institutions. And that is one way to think about it and play it. And try and create the sustaining interest in something. But the thing I spend a lot of time thinking about now is like, if you can emulate some of the dynamics that are happening where 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 people are circling around an idea, like how do NFTs as a vehicle, or, you know, the set of tools that exist around NFTs augment that experience? And I think there's tons of ways to think about that. And if you also combine that with the last couple of things that I've been playing around with have been AI related or neural network related, and also curious about one of the things we shipped for OPEPN recently was this like Tinder interface on the front of the site, where any artist can submit work and it goes into this flow where anybody with an Ethereum wallet can vote on whether or not the artwork resonates with them. And I think the underlying interesting thing about OPEPN specifically is there's like this decentralized consensus being built, but the goal isn't that ambitious in terms of, you know, it's not this like undefined governance structure where we might start a country, or we might, you know, go and acquire different pieces of work or build companies. It's like we're trying to get the 200 most interesting contributions to this finite project, and we have this massive infrastructure to help us get there. And those, like, we've called these things consensus experiments. And the other thing that's really fascinating to me at the moment is AI as this augmentation of creativity, or this way to increase your output by an order of magnitude. But you also have the extra labor on the back end where you curate things. So I feel like the themes that are getting tons of traction in the fungible token world, I always like, you should always pay attention to that stuff too. It's like there's something about this that is incredibly compelling, and people have it resonates because it feels like it's something new and novel. And I do believe that, like, done right, NFTs as a set of technologies can make those experiences that much more interesting. Even things like these AI agents that are tweeting out statements, you know, being able to kind of open source the back end of these types of things and use people's like non-fungible ownership stake in networks to make those decisions, vote on things, and like influence the outcome of something. Like, all of these things are possible with just a, you know, a token with a single logo. Obviously, like, you can build all of this infrastructure on something that you don't have a unique visual representation of. And maybe I'm not thinking deeply enough about like the NFT meta here, because obviously you could have a there doesn't need to be a visual component. It's like to every, what is it, to a hammer every problem looks like a nail. But my experience and the things that I've valued about being around people in this particular part of the crypto space is this like ability to express your taste, or to show something about yourself through these things that you own and collect. And to your point earlier in the conversation, like, collecting is this just incredibly human thing, and being able to so signal that and signal your taste and the things that you care about with these objects is still the most compelling thing on the internet to me today.
After all, I think when it comes to discounting, for example, like basically in real life things like, you know, family, etc. the things that we do with creative things, like collecting art or making art, it seems to really go after something that is core to what makes us human. It really gives soul to a lot of the things that we do as humans. And then the one thing that really resonated from, I mean, everything really resonated, but one thing that you mentioned about, you know, increasing the footprint of participants beyond, let's say 10,000, right? The 10K PFP, increasing that footprint, learning from meme coins actually was something that really landed for me. I think some would love to definitely see some like next generation community formation kind of mechanism, um, uh, and uh, and then combining the fact that these NFTs really have soul. You know, when I own a particular piece of this like collection, it really feels like, you know, mine, as opposed to, let's say I own a sliver of this protocol, this fungible protocol. It has a faceless fungible, you know, single scalable scalar. It feels very different, and so I'm pretty excited where that angle will lead down towards. And then, just for the sake of time, I wanted to open up the room for questions. I know that there is a desk with a chair, and anybody in New York can go to that chair and ask a question. I will add this to the stage, great. And then also, if you're remote, feel free to ask a question on the YouTube video. Let's see if anyone is brave enough to step in that chair and ask the first question.
We've got Zach coming to the front of the room. Thank you for being our first volunteer.
Thank you, Zach.
Clear.
Hello. Thank you for putting this on and having this wonderful chat. Appreciate your input and insights. My question is, along with art, what other use cases do you see on the horizon for NFT powered participation interaction? Aside from, I guess we covered kind of art, creation, interaction. What's on the kind of next peripheral?
I think not to give a cop-out answer, I think to go back to what I was trying to articulate in the middle of the conversation around like borrowing these mechanics from the physical world, or like skeuomorphically translating art to NFTs or games to NFTs or ownable objects in different digital environments. I think all of that stuff is obviously valid and interesting, and people will continue to do that. But the really interesting thing, or the potential, I think, lies in like net new executions of environments that can only exist on top of NFTs. And I think art is like the easiest leap to make. And then maybe like the things that you make can all be categorized as that after the fact. But it's really like, again, sounds a little nonsensical, but it's like experiences or events that can only occur with this as the base set of technologies that connect them. And that's like more of a, like, if you can really approach a problem like that, I think you come up with something totally novel, as opposed to like, and ironically, the things that are easy to raise money and adoption for are like, oh, it's Uber for this, right? Or it's like NFTs for paintings, or, you know, we're going to fractionalize this thing. And it is this like alien technology that I think we kind of underestimate what can come out of the primitives. So I've given basically a non-answer of like, if it can be compared to something that exists, it's maybe not a good use of the technology.
Fair. And I really like what Bonafide Han started with of when he was describing your work as retroactively obvious. I think that Web3, or what I'm seeing, is hybrid models of Web3, Web2 starting to eat away at the traditional walled gardens. And I think this is what kind of can take this conversation full circle, the walled gardens of Web2. And I'll just take a moment to plug. I think digital advertising is one of these things that we can tackle, and what some of us here are working on.
So just if I could, I agree with you. If I could give one, like, again, accidental, like, epiphany or retroactive, I forget what was it? Retroactively
obvious.
Retroactively obvious thing. When I was playing around with the check stuff really early on with the edition artwork, so open edition sold as this grid of 80 check marks, and then there was the ability to update the contract and change the artwork, which became this kind of ritual thing, or this event around the connection that exists between somebody holding this thing in their wallet and looking at it change. Was probably, in retrospect, one of the biggest catalysts for the growth of that project. Was just, what's going to happen next? I don't know. There's like an attention subscription, let's call it, that you have when somebody is holding something that you made and you have the ability to update it. So yeah, I think that is a good one, and it's non-obvious in the sense that you wouldn't think that people would buy objects that advertise to them, digital objects that advertise to them. I don't know how you square that, but there's not been anything super interesting executed in that world as far as I have been made aware of anyway.
Yeah, and then just to kind of add to this fascinating conversation actually is, even the concept of advertising is maybe completely upended by this community formation tools. Ultimately, advertising was basically covering a gap between finding the people for, let's say, a product or service, and finding the tribe that would actually, love it. And I feel like what NFTs in particular have created, and also things, fungible tokens as well, it's created like hyper tribes that, and then if you actually measure the speed of an idea that spreads inside these communities, I think it's probably like at least like one order of magnitude faster, or possibly even two, of how virally an idea spreads in these kinds of communities. So even the idea of advertising may be kind of an old mental model that no longer applies in the ways that we think of advertising, and I think it could be very exciting what could be coming out of it.
I agree completely. I think it boils down to incentive, and Web3 is a perfect incentive mechanism through ownership and engagement.
Totally. Well, thank you, Zach, for stepping up for a question, and great chat. And I think we have probably time for one more question, if there is any.
We've got one coming right up right now.
Oh, amazing.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for doing this. Hey, Jack, this question's
Hi.
for you. I'm a creative director. I come from a long 20 years in advertising, and I'm transitioning to a digital artist, NFT artist, AI. I was curious if you have any advice for up-and-coming artists in the NFT space for exposure that are not traditional, outside of doing something like this, speaking in person and social. Do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, I think the internet as a medium, and specifically Twitter, X, or however you are referring to it personally, is like an unbelievable way to get network exposure on your work. And you can tap into networks that already care about something or already like hyper focused on an idea. And that was actually one of the reasons Opepen is built the way it is to get smaller artists exposure to a group of collectors that have studied this constraint thousands and thousands of times. And that was actually before I even got into crypto. How I grew my Instagram and Twitter pages originally was this thing. I retroactively called it reverse influence. It was basically taking people's ideas that they'd written down or spoken about that resonated with me, and then creating something that added context to that. So I would build these visuals that were, you know, the Naval Ravikants of the world or Nassim Taleb, people whose ideas that I thought were valuable and interesting, tag them on Twitter. I would get, in some cases, amplified by their accounts and then go into the feeds of all the people that already care about them. And this is obviously like not direct prescriptions. You have to find the stuff that fits your work and find the stuff that like you know, that find the stuff that you can augment the most authentically, let's call it. And you just kind of insert yourself into these conversations and these little subcultures, and you just build relationships with people by, you know, the cliche, adding value to these networks as you go. And like a direct recommendation would be go and look at the Opepen constraint, and if there's something that resonates about that, make some of those, and I guarantee you will get impressions on your work if you do that.
Yeah, I've seen that approach a few times. I think that's a super smart idea. Yeah, thank you for that. I think adding value is important and something that artists strive for all the time. Really quickly, is there a balance that you felt in the beginning you were striking of creating personal projects that resonated with you as an artist versus giving the audience what they wanted? What was that like ratio? What was that balance? And how did you make peace with perhaps not always putting out exactly what you wanted to put out, but rather to appease a culture or audience?
Yeah, I think at the beginning I didn't have that directly. I had it more on the product side or more on the consulting side originally, but I put out work on Visualize Value that over time got people who would ask me to do more of that work, you know? So like I coming from, and you worked in advertising, so you'll get this fully, is like that dynamic is like you do what you're told, essentially. It's like you have a body of work out in the world and somebody will come to you and basically pay you to do what they want you to do, versus you have this portfolio of work that really represents what you care about and what you want to make, and people approach you for that specifically. And it is not you know, one day you're doing that thing and then the next day you're doing the other thing. It's like a process where one thing that I always used to say about this, and I think it would still be true, is like when you pick a constraint, you have to do it for such a long time for it to get traction, even in your own mind. Like when I first started the Visualize Value stuff, I picked the constraint as like I was getting something from it, even if nobody saw it. Like it was this like cathartic process of getting these ideas out. But two, it was actually making me better at the process of taking an idea and distilling it into an image. And that feedback loop has to exist for you to carry on long enough to get noticed, basically. You know, like the idea that even if nobody sees this, it's making me a better designer or writer or thinker or interviewer or photographer or whatever the medium is it's like that elusive thing where eventually, hopefully, the magnet flips. You definitely have to start in a place where you're like dancing between those two worlds, or even in some cases, like doing exactly what, in my case, like exactly what the client wants during 9 to 5, and then exactly what I want for all the other hours. And then at a certain point, that thing got big enough where you'd get introduced to people purely on the qualities of that body of work over your, you know, agency pedigree or whatever else it was that was interesting to them.
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the great questions.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. All right, we are at time. Jack wanted to let me remove station 3 from the stage. So Jack wanted to thank you for the time. I thought it was a fascinating conversation. We covered a lot of stuff, and I think probably lit up a lot of light bulbs in people's minds about like things they can build, things they can do themselves. So it was fascinating. Thank you for your time, and really appreciate it.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody in New York for watching and listening. Appreciate it. See you on the internet somewhere.
Yes. See you, Jack.
Bye-bye.
Cool. All right. So we are at the last part, just a couple more minutes. Now we're going to talk about the actual rules and guidelines of Shapecraft. So $250,000 are up for grabs, and both devs and artists can participate in this world. It is an unusual hackathon because most hackathons are for devs. Here, really, artists can have a role in creating worlds inside of as part of Shapecraft. And so Dan Nolan from Alchemy, we're co-hosting this hackathon with Alchemy. He has a short recorded description of the rules and guidelines. I'll add this
We're calling
to the video.
all world builders to
Here we go.
Shapecraft. From November 18th, starting today, to December 15th. There is $250,000 set up for grabs. We're going to talk all about that and more in this presentation. Shapecraft. Welcome. So there's 706 world builders with us today. We are super excited for all of you to be joining us in the Shapecraft Hackathon. So of those 706 world builders, 560 of you are coders, and 146 of you identify as artists, right? So if you take a look at this breakdown here, one thing that you'll notice is as an artist, your skills are in high demand for teams, right? So definitely take that into consideration for any coders, teams of coders that are looking for artists. You'll want to try to find somebody with those art skills. So definitely get on the team formation channels we'll talk about in a moment to start asking people, hey, do you have the skills to help us bring this vision to life, right? You'll take a look at the artists down here and you'll notice that is a pretty even spread amongst the artists that can make game assets, storytellers, collectibles, and web designers. The most being collectibles, the least being the web designers there. So take note of that. And then on the coder side, we have the most smart contract developers and the least game developers. So if you're looking for game developers to help bring your vision to life, let them know they're out there. You just got to find them, bring them to your team. And that's going to be a really intensive part of a lot of these projects. So try to pair up with a good game developer that you can find on these team formations. Or if you are a game developer looking for a smart contract developer, know that they're out there, that you can find them, and that you can find people with the skills that you need to be able to bring your vision to life. Awesome. So let's talk about the prizes. So there's a $250,000 total prize pool brought to you by the Shape team. And in that total prize pool, there are two main tracks. There's New Worlds, and for New Worlds, you'll notice there's a $120,000 prize pool. That's split up amongst 5 finalists, so you can do the math. That's $24,000 for a finalist. And then the existing worlds is $90,000 for 6 finalists, or $15,000 per finalist. All finalists also receive 6 months of free Alchemy growth tier. And then sort of overlapping with the main tracks. With the main tracks, you have to decide every project needs to be submitted to either new worlds or existing worlds. And we'll talk about what those mean in a moment. But then for the supplementary prizes, this can kind of overlap with the main tracks. Because if we notice that your project is one that has good story weaving, or that you've built good game assets, whether it's music or art or sprites or what have you, or collectibles, anything that's on the artistic storytelling lore side of things, then you could receive one of these story weaving supplementary prizes. So that's going to be split up amongst 10 winners for $30,000. And then there's another supplementary prize, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment, which is the best use of the eye and the key. So that sounds a little mysterious. We'll dive into what that means in a moment. That's a $10,000 prize pool, 10 winners. Again, it's a supplementary prize, so it could be in combination with any of the main tracks. It could also be applied to somebody who has not won the main tracks, but had that best use of the eye or key, or maybe it has good story weaving. All supplementary winners will also win 2 months of free Alchemy growth tier. Great. So let's talk about existing worlds. maybe first, actually, let me take a step back and talk about New Worlds because I don't have a slide for it. New Worlds is kind of self-explanatory, especially as we go into the project submissions. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but it's any experience that you're really building upon shared data. So really like anything that you're building on top of NFTs, if you're building a game or some experience that you could have with those NFTs, maybe something that allows people to use NFTs in a new novel way, that could be a new world where you're not actually making use of an existing project. But if you are making use of an existing world on the Shape ecosystem, these would be the 3 projects to take a look at. So the 3 projects would be DeepL by DK, that's this one over here, Movable Type by DefBeef, and Autumn by Golid. So Han explained these projects earlier in way better words than I can use, so definitely check them out and build on top of them if these are things that are really exciting to you. You can imagine building something really cool on top of DeepL that incorporates the avatar, or Movable Type, taking those words and building something out of those words by having a bunch of letters and pulling them all together, or Autumn to really build like crafting items and weapons and all kinds of things that you can imagine building into a game from these chemical compounds, right? Like this really low level stuff, but building it up into something much, much bigger. So these would be the existing world. So if you're going to go down this track, like I said, there's 6 finalists that you can find that you could build these things on and incorporate into your world or experience. Great. So the eye and the key, this is what I was mentioning I would talk about a little bit more. For the eye, so this is a NFT collection by Quibibi called Awakened. This one is going to be something that you can purchase, that you can find on mainnet, whereas the key over here is something that's going to be unlockable that you can earn via winning a game on mainnet. Now for both of these on testnet, you don't need to necessarily, you don't need to go purchase something or earn something in order to be able to use these on testnet. If you go to nomadmultiverse.com, you can actually just mint these, or we could give you the NFT collection address. You'll find these in the resources to be able to actually just mint these by calling the mint function on the testnet. On mainnet, you will actually have to refer to these contracts specifically, and any user who has these items will then be able to use them in your world. Now, how would you use these in the world? If you're building a game, for example, you might be able to take this eye, and I'll show you the animation here because it's really cool. You might be able to take this eye, and if somebody's a holder of this NFT, inside of your game, you can imagine it being something like they have extra kind of vision, right? Maybe they're able to see new areas or new treasure chests, new items, new ghosts that other people can't see inside of your game. That might be one way to implement it, right? You could definitely be very creative here, and that's going to be a key part of the criteria that we're going to see in the judging in just a moment. Then on the other side, you have the key, and the key is something that, again, like I said, you can earn. The key is going to be this item that you could potentially also bring into your worlds to maybe unlock a treasure chest or a room or new experience. Maybe you could even use it as a weapon. That would be pretty cool. It's really up to you how you want to implement these things. We do have a sprite for the key that you can use if you're using this in a 2D world. So you'll see that in resources as well. And like I said, these are freely mintable on the testnet. And then on the mainnet, we'll have a collection that you can refer to. And we'll talk about these a little bit more as the hackathon goes on. On Thursday, we're actually going to be doing a workshop specifically around the key. So stay tuned for that and check that out when that becomes available. Awesome. So let's go into the logistics. So logistics, the main source of communication is going to be through Shape Discord. We will continue to be reaching out to you via email, the email that you signed up on Alchemy University. But for anything that you need to communicate on, you're primarily going to go use the Shape Discord. You can find that in the resources on Alchemy University. If you go into Alchemy University now, there's a whole bunch of new information there in the Shapecraft Hackathon. You could go find the Shape Discord and get invited there. For Alchemy University, you can come and ask any questions about the products, any questions about the tools that you might be using to build these worlds. We're happy to help you with any technical support that you might need on that. Cool. For the schedule looks a little like this. Again, there's really 4 weeks, right? We're kicking off today, and we end 4 weeks from today when the project submissions are due on 12/16. Every Tuesday, there's going to be an async check-in. I recommend that you do these. This keeps us up to date with your project, and so we know that you're like working on it, right? This is one of the ways that the judges can keep up and the teams can keep up with what you're working on, and we can know what kind of progress you're making, so we can provide more resources to you, but also being able to keep up with knowing that you're actually like working on the project and making sure that you're not just submitting some big project at the end of the hackathon, and then we don't know when you actually worked on it, right? We don't want any unfair advantages, so make sure you're checking in with the teams with your projects, making sure that you're putting up GitHub commits so that we can see the progress that you're making along the way, so that nobody has unfair advantage, pulls in like a project that they worked on previously or something like that. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we'll be having this team formation session, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But if you're still looking for a team, we're going to hold an event to help you try to find one and try to corral everybody into one event to try to help find people's teams. But we also recommend that you try to do all this stuff asynchronously, right? Shapecraft is primarily asynchronous. It's a global event, so people are going to be in all different time zones, right? When you're looking for team members, you should ask them like what time zone they're in. That may be a consideration if you're in completely opposite time zones, like maybe a little bit harder to work together. But we want to make the event itself primarily asynchronous, so that way you don't need us to be there necessarily in order to do some of these things, like find teams or be able to get feedback on your projects from other teams or from team members of ours that happen to be online at that time. On Thursday, like I said, we'll do an item distribution workshop that's going to be about the key. Super excited about that. And then Friday, we're going to be doing project feedback sessions where you can take some time with us on the Alchemy University side, but also on the Shape side to get some feedback on your projects. Am I going in the right direction? What can I improve? Those sorts of things we want to bring up and do that live on Fridays. And we'll vary the times, so hopefully people in different time zones can reach out to us on those. So keep an eye out for what times those are going on. We'll be telling you more through the email and through Discord. So the hackathon info you could start building now, so you are open to begin. Start making your GitHub commits, start finding your team members. Don't fret if you're not ready to begin, you're still finding teams. Most people are. You're still trying to figure out what to build. There's plenty of time to build it over the course of the 4 weeks. So, make sure to pace yourself, and we'll talk about that next slide as well. 5 members per team, that's the max. We'll have 4 weeks to build the project, and find anything that you need to know on university.alchemy.com. On the sidebar, you'll find Shapecraft where you registered. You'll find a lot more info there now. So for the weeks of the hackathon, remember to pace yourself and have fun. There's 4 weeks. Really, the first week is about like getting your team members, getting your idea down, maybe even just start developing on it. Week 2, you really want to start getting it into a working state. That gives you time in week 3 to start bringing your project to mainnet. Now, yes, we're going to talk about this in a moment. You do have to have your project on Shape mainnet. That is a requirement for this hackathon. We'll talk about what that means, and we'll talk about that a little bit further down in the slides. Finally, week 4, polish and video submit. So video submission is going to be a big part of your submission as a team. It may be the only way that judges actually interact with your project, because that's going to be the main way that they consume what you've created. So really think about what you want to convey in a 5-minute video. Submit that at the end of the hackathon, and make sure you give yourself plenty of time to build that project or to build that video, because that's going to be the most important thing for the judges to see and to understand your project before they dive any further into your GitHub repository or any other things that you may have submitted as part of the project submission. So how to find a team, join the Shape Discord. That's going to be the main thing. Let people know what your skills are. Again, if your skills are in high demand, you saw the stats before, then you know that people are looking for people that have your skill set. So let them know. If you have any ideas that interest you, that's also another way, is like get other people who have similar ideas to you. There's an ideation channel that you can find in the Shape Discord to talk about the ideas that you have. Post them up there and see if anyone else is interested in working with you on that. Look at the existing projects posted in Shape Discord, see if they need your skills. And finally, join the team formation session tomorrow, Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. This is the last resort sort of thing. Plenty of people are still going to be looking for a team, so we want to try to corral that energy, but try to find somebody, if you can, asynchronously. Take a look in the Shape Discord, ask other people what they're building, and, get excited and have some fun. Cool. Judging. So for judging, I mentioned this idea that there is a mainnet requirement. So your project must read or write to Shape mainnet. Now on the read side, you kind of have an advantage here, right? Because you don't have to necessarily send transactions on chain. You don't necessarily have to write smart contracts. Reading is much, much easier on that side. So if you're building a game that builds on top of other NFT collections, like the Key or the Eye or any of the existing projects that are out there, you could potentially build a game that's just reading from these things like a database, right? And knowing who owns those and being able to bring them into your world and do something like that. So that's quite possible that you're purely just reading from mainnet, in which case you don't have to worry about gas costs or anything like that. If you are writing to Shape mainnet, that may be something that you need to save time for, you need to think about. You want to do that after your project is really fully fleshed out. So definitely think about that, what you want to do there. So in the meantime, right, you could use the testnet fully and get familiar with that all the way up until when your project is ready to go to mainnet. So start from scratch. Your projects must start from scratch, except for any open source starter kits or libraries or any workshop materials that we've created. We have a whole bunch of workshops that you can find on Alchemy University/resources. When you go into the hackathon, when you go into that tab, you can find these 8 workshops that we gave or a bunch of other workshops at shapecraft.xyz. And that's going to be stuff that you can use as well. Just let us know what you used. That's the only thing we really ask. It needs to be publicly available, so it can't be like a reusing of one of your personal projects from way back when. You can't do that. That's taking old work and bringing it in, it's a bit of an unfair advantage to anyone else who's starting from scratch in the hackathon. So no reusing a personal project. You must start from scratch like everyone else. Level playing field across the board. Put all your submission and everything on GitHub so that way we can see your commit history. Async check in with us on Tuesdays. That way we know like what you're up to and we can keep tabs with you, help you out, but also know that you're working through this stuff just like everyone else in the hackathon. And finally, you can use existing game assets, so that's totally fine. So any sprites, tile seats, any game assets that you find online that are publicly available, again, just let us know what you used and let us know what you built. That helps us do better judging on our side. So lastly, ask us if you have any questions. If I didn't answer everything here, ask us if you have any questions. We're freely available to answer any of this stuff. Project submission, submit your project on Alchemy University before December 16th at 12 p.m. UTC. Again, give yourself plenty of time. Maybe submit on December 15th, right? There's no penalty to submitting early. Just get it out there. You know, you're gonna need to put in a title, a description, your team member's GitHub link, live demo where you can, and a 5-minute video. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to be able to create that video and really think about creatively how you can share your vision with the judges, right? You wanna capture attention here. You wanna build something that's really going to excite the judges and help them recognize the vision that you had and how you were able to execute on that. So be sure to spend good time on your video. This is the judges' potentially only impression of your project. If it's not like a video that really, shows much interesting execution, much interesting development on your side, then it's not something a judge is likely to spend too much more time on, maybe looking at the GitHub, maybe looking at the demo, but the video is really where you capture the judge's attention. So make sure that you spend plenty of time on that. We won't accept late submissions. We can't bend the rules for anyone. So please get your projects in on time. Give yourself plenty of time to build that. For judging, these are going to be the primary criteria that we look at for all the judges. So there's 5 judges. You can find the judges on Alchemy University. You go to the judges tab. There's execution, creativity, composability, and aesthetics. Execution is really how well did you execute on the vision that you have? Does your project work? There's bonus for integrating things like Web3 Stack, like smart accounts, account kit from Alchemy. So we have a video on that, so check that out. That's like the 7th video in the 8 videos that we did going into this hackathon. So definitely check that out on the resources tab. For creativity, just having like an original use case, new ideas, concepts, or better solutions for existing problems. This is what you're going to want to do there. We're going to give you bonus points there if you integrate things like the key and the eye, any existing projects, things like that. So keep that in mind. The key and the eye also give you access to that supplementary prize that you could also win for the best use of the key and the eye. So make sure to use them if you can integrate them into your vision and your world. Composability, this is going to be a huge aspect of the hackathon, is can you build this web of NFTs? Can you build worlds on top of shared data? So if you're building a new world, you should display high potential to be able to be composed upon, to be used by other people. If you're building existing worlds, showing that you have a deep integration of things like the DeepL, movable type, or atoms, or you could use all 3 of these, right? Whatever combination you want to do. But that shows us that you're building on top of these other worlds, right? That we're using the data layer on the blockchain, and then we're able to expand on that, right? So that we can create this like ever-growing source of content. And then finally, for the aesthetics, that it delivers like high UI, UX, usability, and design, good game assets, whether it's music or backgrounds or tile sets, sprite sheets, what have you. We'll be looking at that as well. Cool, just 2 more things. So last 2 things, resources. Again, like I said, go to shapecraft.xyz, university.alchemy.com, go to the hackathon tab, check out Shapecraft, and go to the resources tab. You could also use the Alchemy University courses for all your Web3 educational needs. So definitely check all that stuff out on the resources tab on Alchemy University. And finally, the code of conduct. Code of conduct was agreed upon on registration. It's also available on Alchemy University. We want to make sure that this is going to be a fun and safe place for everybody. If you need any assistance with this sort of thing, then reach out to Alchemy team member or Shape team member in either Discord. We're happy to assist you. Again, we want to make this a fun and safe space for everybody, so make sure you adhere to that code of conduct and just be nice to everybody, right? Great, so that is it. That's Shapecraft. All right. Excited to see you all in there, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
Great. That was Dan Nolan. Thank you, Dan. He couldn't join us live, but thanks for the recording. And thanks everyone for joining us for this kickoff for Shapecraft at New York. I've been doing these actually, so I did one for Paris. I'm doing this one for New York right now, and then I'll do another one in SF. So that's the reason I couldn't make it. I basically needed to do all these cities. Would have loved to make it in person. but wanted to thank you for taking the time, joining us. Enjoy the food, enjoy the alcohol, and really excited to see all the things that everyone will build. I think this is going to be part of the next phase of NFTs, where we do really cool things. We become the experimenters, the hackers, the rebels that actually make what NFTs will become for the next cycle. So really honored to be here with you, excited, and thank you for joining us.